What is going on with the Vancouver rental market right now? In this week's video, we're going to dive deeper into what's happening with rents across the Lower Mainland, and we're also going to look at what the BC provincial government is doing to try and encourage landlords to rent out their secondary suites. Real quick, if this is your first time to the channel, my name is Hassan. I'm a real estate agent in the Vancouver area, and I make educational real estate content to help you on your real estate journey. When I'm not making videos like this, I'm helping people just like you buy and sell real estate across the Lower Mainland. So if that sounds interesting to you, or you just want to chat about your real estate situation with me one-on-one, you can book me for a free call in the Calendly link below and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a future video. All right, so the Vancouver rental market, if you follow my channel for a bit, you know that I do periodically talk about this. Generally, the conversation over the last few years has been how Vancouver rents and Toronto rents and rents all across the country have been climbing at uncontrollable rates at times, and how it's been a big factor in inflation. Times they are a-changing, and what we're seeing now in Vancouver, according to several rental reports, is rental rates down year over year, depending on which rental reports you're looking at, anywhere from 5 to 9% down year over year, 3 consecutive months of rental rate declines. There's been a lot of changes in the market when it comes to the key drivers that affect rents. Metro Vancouver, Toronto as well. Toronto down 7% year over year with their rents. So we were essentially in a time period where we couldn't get these rents under control. And ultimately what has happened now is we've seen that stabilization. Specifically here in Vancouver, we've seen a lot of condo completions happen in Vancouver, in Burnaby, some of the most amount of completions we've had in a few years. And this has driven rental rates to stabilize. We've also, as I've talked about on my channel, had the short-term rental legislation. So that has pushed a bunch of units into the long-term rental market. So all of these little pieces, and now we're starting to see what that is doing for the actual rental rates, depending on which report you're looking at. I subscribe to a few of them, some of the top rental reports out there, and we're looking at anywhere for a 1-bedroom unfurnished, anywhere from $2,550 to $2,700 per month. If we look at things from a national perspective, as we know, the cost of everything has increased so significantly over the last few years. People are struggling. It's tough for people to pay the bills. And so, when I look at our counterparts in the East and I follow a lot of the news that's happening out there, you see so many scenarios over there, and it does happen here, but you see so many scenarios over there where, there'll be a detached home, and, within that detached home, there's 10 or 12 people renting in that home. Many of them are immigrants just coming to Canada and, trying to put a roof over their head, and they're coming together and they're living in these close quarters in order to keep the costs down. Now, on a smaller scale, here in Vancouver, we are definitely seeing more people be in roommate scenarios where they would have chose or preferred to live on their own. We're seeing 2 or 3 people now, sometimes sharing a 1 or 2-bedroom unit. People can only pay so much for rent. And I think that's what we're seeing when it comes from a rental price perspective. Rents were never going to go up forever, right? Like anything cyclical, there were going to be some downtimes, there are going to be some upflow as well. And I think what we're seeing is just people at that tipping point, at that breaking point of cost of living, that I can't spend more. And so we see that shift of people that were maybe living in Vancouver and now they're choosing to live in Coquitlam, and people that were living in Coquitlam, they're now choosing to live in Surrey, and Surrey's shifting over to Langley and even eastward to Abbotsford. So there's more of a shift happening. People can't just afford whatever price is put in front of them. And we're seeing that quite heavily in the rental market right now. I think what's going to be very interesting to watch for next year, and we'll say the next 6 to 9 months, is there's a lot of reform coming to immigration in Canada. I believe that it's more than just words now. Heavy pressure on the federal government for allowing immigration to get so out of control, basically allow it to get to the point where, our growth as a population far exceeding the percentage of homes that we're completing on an annual basis. We complete about 240,000 homes a year, and yet that number of residents just, 2, 3 times that, 4 times that at times. And so, I think there's going to be a big shift. And I think where we're going to see that even more, like what we're seeing right now, is in that rental market, where, we're going to have less people coming into the country. We're going to have a lot of people that are in the country right now going back to their countries of origin too. So this is all going to have an effect on the rental market. Swinging it to BC, I want to talk a little bit about what's happening with the provincial government and trying to incent even more rental units onto the market. It's funny because in this province, if you watch my channel for a bit, we've talked so much about this government's legislation, heavily leaning in favor of tenants, nothing really in favor of landlords when it comes to rent controls, when it comes to wait times at RTB. Yes, they're trying to improve them, but all of the stuff that's ever put on the table for landlords, just never enough to incent or encourage landlords to even want to rent in this province. And I speak with so many clients that have shifted their focus into other provinces to purchase rental properties and rental investments. I talked earlier on my channel, probably a few months ago, about BC launching a secondary suite program, incentive program. And essentially what that was, they were piloting it, they were putting it out there where they were going to offer homeowners loans of up to $40,000 for 50% of the cost towards renovating or creating a secondary suite in the home, provided that the landlord rents below market for at least 5 years. I've been pretty vocal about what I thought about that program. Again, in a province where every single legislation is geared towards the tenant, and now trying to throw money at the landlords to say, look, we actually need you. We're not really going to help you in the long run, but let's see if we can throw some money at you and have you rent. And so the pilot program, I think they opened it up 1,500 people, maybe even less than that when they first launched it. And then they announced, okay, we're going to launch it to more communities. We're going to open up this pilot program. I don't have the exact numbers. I'd be surprised if the take rate was very high on that program. Just the other day now, talk about an insurance fund for landlords. So what this would be essentially, and they're looking to launch this next year, is if you are a landlord and you have a tenant, tenant doesn't pay the bill, you as a landlord, you go to the RTB, and if the RTB says that the tenant has to pay, then if you can't track down the tenant to get the payment, you can go to this insurance fund that exists somewhere, and it's going to pay you for the rent. How long that process is going to take? What does it mean to say if you can't track down the tenant? What if you can track down the tenant and the tenant is like, I'm not paying you? Like, how is that all going to look? So we need to see more details of that. But I just find it pretty funny in this province where you can't just throw money at things. You can't create legislation that's very one-sided and then throw money at things in another direction and think that things are going to balance out. Speaking of balancing out, our budget the deficit in the budget now, I believe it's at $9 billion, increase some more. So spend, but it's not quite doing things successfully on the housing front. Markets will always figure themselves out, and that's what's happening in Vancouver now with that increased supply. Now, with the rental rates coming down a bit, I've sold a few properties in the last few months where clients have been rental investors, and for a couple of them, they chose to take lower rents in order to be able to have a lot more control over who the tenant was that was coming into their property. It's a very different atmosphere when it comes to purchasing rental properties than it was a few years back. Before, it was people didn't want to miss out. People wanted to make sure they got a piece of the action. We've been having to put cash into these rentals for some time now. So it's not as if people have been purchasing these properties in order to cash flow. But what I'm finding is when the market was hot, people don't want to miss out. They want their piece. They don't want appreciation to get away from them. They don't want to not be able to afford a rental property moving forward. What I'm finding now is most of my rental property buyers are buying for future generations. So they understand that they're going to have to feed the property this year. They're going to have to feed the property next year. They're looking at the market and they're thinking, okay, if things standardize, if they go back to normal, and we see, that sort of 3 to 5% appreciation each year, this for a lot of people now has taken the place of an education fund. So I have clients come to me and they have young children and they're thinking about their children's future and they're saying, I can save for an education, and with that education money, my client can go to school, get their bachelor's degree, bachelor of arts, bachelor's in business, whatever it might be. Then they got to go out in that workforce and they got to scramble, they got to try and get that job. And you hear all of these horror stories of people going to school, getting these degrees, and then they're stepping out and they're having to work minimum wage jobs because there are no jobs. And right now, unemployment keeps rising. So what more young families are doing is they're understanding that real estate is tangible. They can pay that down payment into a property. They can feed it a few $100s per month, but they're investing in their child's future. Now, some lucky children, of course, their parents are saving for education and they're purchasing property. And I think those children, they're going to have a leg up once they hit 17, 18 years old. They enter that workforce or they enter post-secondary school, they're going to definitely have a leg up. So the people that are purchasing rentals now is very, very different. It's all future generation driven. So circling this back to the province trying to incent you as a homeowner, perhaps you've owned your home for your detached home in Vancouver, Burnaby for 15, 17 years. You have a small mortgage on it. You have a suite downstairs. It's vacant. It's empty. You use it for guests to come in. I have a hard time believing that you are going to be incented to put that suite onto the rental market. And so we're going to see a lot more of this happen as well, as people build up more equity, as they don't need that rental income. Secondary suites, they're going to come off the rental market. I said it probably 8 or 9 months ago. I said secondary suites for long-term rental, for long-term tenants is going to be done. If anything, people may do it for short-term basis. Use it because it's part of the principal residence. They can actually rent it as short-term rental if they so choose. But I think most people, definitely the people I'm talking to, they're having families stay there. They're using it as space for the upstairs. That secondary suite is done. And I think the province kind of sees that, there's a great risk that we're going to lose that secondary suite type of rental. The rentals are pretty much going to be the condos. But now you have policies that are basically telling people not to invest in the condos. And when they're not investing in the condos and the builders aren't building the condos because they're not selling enough units to be able to move forward. And so you can see how everything is connected to one another. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, hit the like button, because what that does is it takes the video and it sends it out to more people so they can also learn from it. And if you enjoy weekly real estate content, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss next week's video. And lastly, again, if you live in the Lower Mainland or Metro Vancouver and you wanted to chat with me about your real estate situation, you can book me for a call through Calendly, or you can just send me a text, give me a call, shoot me an email, whatever works for you. I'd be happy to chat with you. But I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this video, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.